This meeting is being recorded.
So we've gone through voice issues this week. We've gone through work issues this week for some of us. We've gone through the fact that it's 90 freaking degrees outside right now. And we've gotten through the fact that one of our panelists is 1 year away from 40. Happy birthday, Anthony!
Happy birthday, Anthony.
Oh, you were 38, not 39. So I had to look at that. So I'm Stephen Rabinowitz. This is Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait. Welcome to the On the Sports Lines, Wherever We Are edition. It is a beautiful Saturday morning here in Long Island as we are all from our homes. We are 1/4 of the way through the Stanley Cup playoffs, a little more than that now. We are more than a halfway through the hunt for Lord O'Brien's chalice / trophy, also known as the NBA playoffs. But we interrupt this talk of the 12 teams remaining in the NHL and NBA postseason for a team who made it to the Final Four in the last 2 NHL postseasons, that being the New York Islanders. In what is seemingly becoming an annual tradition in New York, this year it was the Islanders that made a shocking coaching change, getting rid of Barry Trotz after 3 straight years of playoffs and 5 playoff series victories. That happened a couple of Mondays ago, and this past Monday replaced him with this longtime assistant for over a decade in Lane Lambert, a guy who sounds like he's 36, but is actually in his mid-50s. Islander GM Lou Lamoriello said that the team needed a new voice with the hiring of Lambert, and who else but a 79-year-old is good to say that there's anything that is new needed in anything? Anyway, Anthony, it must be like politics. Just ask the people who are over 75 the answer. All right, Anthony.
And I apologize for those who are listening. I sound like a cross between Clint Eastwood and Lou Holtz, but that's a different story. I think it's a bad call. I mean, look at the Islanders season and the way it started. I mean, they had one of the oldest teams in the league, without question. They had the issues with COVID to start out, like 2 days into the season. And then on top of that, they didn't even play a home game for almost a month. So right out of the gate, Barry Trotz's team was kind of behind the 8 ball, and they really struggled to kind of make up for lost ground because of the canceled games, because of playing 60 straight games on the road to start the season. But I feel like Barry Trotz got a bit of should have gotten a break got a leeway this year because of the immediate success he was able to bring out. I mean, his first 2 years during the conference finals back-to-back years. But very little offensive firepower, team discipline, team defense. I thought the foundation was down to eventually get to the Stanley Cup. Unfortunately, because of how the season started out and how it played out, and the Islanders did play better after the All-Star break, but they were just too far behind in a really tough Eastern Conference to make any ground as far as trying to get into the playoffs. I just feel like it could have been politics behind the scenes. I played an issue in this. Maybe Barry Trotz's coaching style, while very strict discipline, can will us some of the older veteran players, maybe some of the younger players also. But I feel like Barry Trotz should have gotten at least maybe 1 more year where the circumstances would be a little more of the normal, whereas we would have had a more of a traditional schedule. Maybe COVID would be such a factor in the season as well. I feel like Lamb Labor, I don't know too much about him. I just know he's been an assistant of the Trotz for over a decade. So you're pretty much you change out the voice, but you're still keeping the coaching tendencies, and maybe the fundamentals are still there. So I think what some of the issues with the Islanders was the roster makeup themselves. They were a much older veteran group. They needed to get younger. They needed to get more athletic, particularly the forwards and the first 2-3 lines. They need to get younger, more athletic. I think that would have been a bigger help than a coaching change for the Islanders is concerned. But I still feel like this is maybe a politics issue as more as a coaching change and a reason to bring in a new voice.
Yeah, and could it also technically be a politics issue or something like that. I think we'll talk about this in a second. The direction that they went kind of knows that this isn't kind of like the Rangers situation last year, Jay. But again, when you still have a year left of a guy who's won a Stanley Cup and taking you to heights that you haven't been in 3 decades, that's the weird move with all of this, Jay.
Yeah, Rabbi, when the news first broke, I thought Islander GM Lou Lamoriello was out of his fracking mind. Yeah, as Anthony said, the team had a down year. They missed the playoff by 16 points, finishing 37, 35, and 10 for 84 points. First time in 4 seasons that Trotz was at the helm, they don't make a postseason appearance. And that's after, the aforementioned 2 straight trips to the conference semifinals. You lose to the eventual champion each year in Tampa Bay. Trotz is one of the most successful coaches in NHL history. 914 career wins. That's number 3 all time. He's got a Stanley Cup title. He has 2 Coach of the Year awards, including one with the Islanders. So why in the HE double hockey sticks would you fire him? And I started reading and researching and realized this isn't actually anything new for Lamoriello. He actually fired Hall of Famer Larry Robinson, who owned 10 Stanley Cup rings, after he had taken New Jersey to back-to-back trips to the Stanley Cup, including a championship in 2000. Did this about halfway through the Devils' 01-02 season, replacing him with Kevin Constantine in late January. Devils were in 9th place in the Eastern Conference at the time. Not great considering what they had done the previous 2 years, but they were still within striking distance of the playoffs. And I don't know if you guys remember, but I do. And a lot of us in this area had trouble wrapping our heads around the move at the time, including Robinson, who told the Globe and Mail in Canada, quote, "I got there," meaning the Stanley Cup final, in my first 2 years, and now all of a sudden, in my 3rd year, I can't coach. I don't think that's right. But, here we are again. Though Trotz hasn't made any similar comments in the wake of being let go and subsequently replaced by his right-hand man of 11 years, I have to say, here's what got to me, though. Some of Lamoriello's comments in the wake of the decision to fire Trotz had me scratching my head. When he was asked why he just made the move, he said he would rather not get into any of the reasons, but he did specify that the decision was not primarily made on this season. That's the head scratcher, considering the Islanders are coming off, those consecutive trips to the semis. He went on to thank Trotz for everything he did for the organization over the last 4 years and followed that with this quote: "It would be a tremendous understatement to say that this wasn't an easy decision to make. This is a business decision as far as hockey and winning." Really? Okay, here's another head scratcher. When asked if he consulted with anyone on the decision, Lamoriello said, quote, "Did I consult with anyone on the decision? The answer is no. Did I speak to the players on this decision? No. I would never even consider thinking of anything like that. This decision is on the knowledge that I have of the experiences I've had and also going forward as far as what I think and feel is best for this group to have success." Okay, the reasons why I have trouble with that one, guys, is that he waited a week to fire Trotz after the exit meeting with the players. According to an NHL source with knowledge of the Islanders' dressing room, Lamoriello's assertion that the decision was made without any player input is suspect. He points out that the GM surely knew what the players were thinking after holding those standard individual meetings with them immediately after the season. Here's the quote from that source. "When you wait a week to fire a guy, you've obviously listened to the players in their meetings. It wasn't done right when the season was over, so he took a week, met with the players, and obviously the players' voices have been heard here, and this is the result," end quote. Lamoriello said a major reason for deciding to go with Lambert was a stretch in January when Lambert took over the coaching duties from Trotz, who had to take a leave of absence to deal with a family matter. Lamoriello was impressed with the leadership Lambert showed as the Isles went 2-1 over the 3 games Trotz missed. And here's Lamoriello's quote on that. "When Lambert was put in that role, he had no questions in his mind as far as his decision-making, no insecurities in the conversations I had with him, the homework he did prior to making some of the decisions that were put upon him, whether it be a line change, mixing lines, the systemic parts of the game. He was totally comfortable in his own skin to make decisions that had to be made," end quote. Now, I agree with Kevin Kurtz, who's the Athletics beat writer for the Islanders. System-wise, there probably won't be much difference under Lambert. After all, he helped design and implement the systems that, those systems, and has had much success with them, working with Trotz over those 11 years, including their Stanley Cup together with the Caps in 2018, and the now beaten to death mentioning of the back-to-back appearances in the league semifinals. There's a school of thought, though, that while the message may still be good, the messenger needs to change in order for it to keep being heard. Kurtz had a great opening line in his piece on why Lambert was picked to succeed his old boss that plays into this school of thought, and I'm stealing it to end my piece. Meet the new voice. Same as the old voice? I guess we'll see.
Well, if that old voice is closer to AARP status, then yes, I think it is the same voice. By the way, one thing that's funny, you mentioned the Larry Robinson firing. They also didn't keep the interim into 2002, 2003. That became Pat Burns. That became a Stanley Cup championship. So, and the one thing that's really funny about this whole thing with Lou Lamoriello is going in-house. You could have gone Joel Quenneville. Good God, that would have been so much trouble. You could have gone Mike Babcock. That would have been a lesser of a move.
Well, there's a relationship there, though, so it wouldn't have been.
There is a relationship there, but
a lot of people's early choice.
But both bring controversy, and I don't think that's what the Islanders needed. And that's kind of why. And also Trotz's contract status. He has a year left on his contract. That was one of the reasons why he left Washington. Remember, Trotz hadn't missed the playoffs in his entire tenure in the Eastern Conference. That's 7 seasons prior, and he's only missed the playoffs 3 times since 03-04. So he's got a lot of stuff going on. You could have also gone with the Peter DeBoer. That may have been the safer choice if you wanted to keep everything, who just got fired.
Yeah, that name was thrown about.
But well. I think Lambert is a fine choice. I think this is the best. I guess this is the best possible move. I don't know what happened out there in those player meetings, and it's honestly one thing that's good about hockey and probably terrible about hockey at the same time. Not our right to know, and no one is going to tell. And I think that's one of the reasons why we made this move. It turned out, as much as we hated the Rangers move last year, it ultimately, as bad as this current series has gone, and we'll talk about that in a second, it ultimately turned out to be the right one, at least for the moment. Maybe this turns out to be the right one for the Islanders. As you said, they were 16 points back of a playoff spot this year. Every team had 100 points or more. And outside of Pittsburgh and Washington with their aging cores, there's no real hole to move up. So the Islanders are going to have to make moves. And again, it doesn't involve getting a 45-year-old sniper who was pretty much a minus every time he was on the ice this year in Zdeno Chara. So they're going to have to do a lot more moves in the offseason as well. All right. A little over 8 days ago at this time, I was planning for a Rangers postmortem. They were down 3-1 to the Penguins, and it looked grim in round 1. Then a 5-3 win in game 5 after being down 2 goals. A 5-3 win in game 6 after being down 2 goals. Does that sound familiar? And a 4-3 OT win in game 7 next to my boy, the bread man, Artemi Panarin. Now the Hurricanes are the next obstacle for the Rangers, and I can say we're almost ready for a Rangers postmortem again. A 3-2 overtime loss in game 1 where they actually started to play defense, and then they haven't played offense for the rest of the series. Lost that overtime game. We'll talk about that in a second. And then lost last night 2-0 in a game that could have gone 180 minutes, and they still wouldn't have scored. The Canes are the team that topped the Rangers in the Metropolitan Division by 4 points. They pretty much have a star everywhere you look. Canes also went 7, though, and they haven't been in a series apparently this year because a series starts when a road team wins, and no road team won the series against Boston, and the home team is held served now. With all of that being said, Jay, a lot of positives in the last 3 games against Pittsburgh and the first 2/3 of a game against Carolina. Name one that needs to continue.
You know, I mean, as you noted, Rabbi, they managed 1 goal through the first 2 games and have been thoroughly outplayed by Carolina. So trying to find a positive that needs to continue as the series moves to the world's most famous arena with the Blue Shirts down 0-2 was a bit of a struggle. But in the end, there was only one choice, and that's the play of Igor Shesterkin. The Rangers netminder was coming off a rough first-round series against the Penguins where he's pulled from both Game 3 and Game 4 when he allowed 10 goals on 45 shots in 3 periods. As the Rangers went down 3-1 in the series, and as you said, looked to be done. Overall, Igor's allowed 25 goals on 277 shots for a .910 save percentage and a not so sterling 3.66 goals against average. But he returned to the form that has him as a finalist for both the Vezina and Hart trophies, winning the last 3 games, allowing just 9 goals on 109 shots. It's a .917 save percentage. More importantly, a 2.93 goals against average, highlighted by his performance in Game 7, where he stopped 39 of 42 shots. So far through the first 2 games, he's allowed just 3 goals on 47 shots. That's a Very nice 936 save percentage and a sparkling 1.50 goals against average. We talked about this all season, about how resilient this Rangers team has been, how they've really bought into the whole no quit in New York thing. They had 27 comeback wins in the regular season, came back from the brink of elimination 3 times against Pittsburgh, and they really have been in both of these games. They've done a good job of limiting the Hurricanes' scoring chances so far through these first 2 games, which, along with Shesterkin's play, has kept them in both games. But if their big guns like Kreider, Zibanejad, Panarin, and Fox keep struggling and they keep coming up on the empty on the power play, they're 0 for 5, including 0 for 4 in game 2. It won't matter if Igor keeps standing on his head. And make no mistake, he'll have to. The Rangers may not be long for this series. Teams, you guys know the stat. Teams that take a 2-0 lead in a best-of-7 NHL playoff series are 339 and 52. That is an 86.7 rather percent winning percentage, including 2-0 in the first round. Carolina is now up 2-0 for the second straight series. Doesn't bode well for the hockey tenants of Madison Square Garden.
It doesn't, but again, they played a lot better in those first 2 games than Boston did against Carolina. And when the scene shifted, Carolina did not look good. They just never, ever left that at Boston in the Northeast and didn't keep it with them.
You gotta hope the home cooking is going to be, what
it's going to be huge. But one thing it also is very, very evident: Carolina do not make mistakes, and you have to take advantage of the games when they're bad. And game 1 was one of the times when they should have taken advantage. All right, Anthony, negatives. Lots of negatives. Name one that needs to discontinue.
It's so funny because coming into this series, I was going to focus on the Rangers defense and the fact that they gave up the most shots on goal in the first round of all the playoff teams, and the fact that they allowed the Penguins to have 103 high scoring chances that's in the slot and just beyond the blue and just past the outside circle of the defensive zone. They allowed 103 scoring chances in that 7-game series. And I felt like the Rangers defense needs to improve against a very deep, very battle-tested Carolina team that can take advantage of mistakes. However, the first 2 games, the Rangers defense hasn't been a problem. They've done a great job of limiting the Carolina Hurricanes' transitional game from defense to offense. They made one huge mistake. Panarin didn't get back defensively. Probably could have prevented Sebastian Aho's game-time goal had he been able to get back and maybe tie him up. It would have prevented him from getting the rebound on that initial shot on Igor Shesterkin. But the Rangers offense, I think the problem with the Rangers right now is that they've been so focused on playing defense and slowing down Carolina's ability to generate offense that they become tentative offensively themselves. You see Panarin not taking his shots. He's looking to pass a little too much. Look at the guy, look at the top line, Zibanejad and Kreider. They have 0 points in the first 2 games of this series. The Hurricanes defensively have done a great job with the forechecking, being very aggressive. Game 2, they were 0 for 4 on a power play. They had a 4-minute power play where they couldn't get the puck into the zone to even set up offensive in the first half of the power play. They have got to be able to move to get the puck in, generate some offense, and get shots on net. Anthony Rogers only had to do 20. Only had to save 20 shots in that third period. He dumped in the game 1. He really didn't have to do anything because Carolina really controlled the tempo of that game. The Rangers have to open it up offense. I know the defense was their weakness in the first round, but excuse me, but offensively, they've got to be able to get pucks on net. They're so used to playing a sort of style offensively. Carolina has managed to make this an ugly, muck-it-up series that is not playing to the Rangers' benefit. They're going to have to simplify the offense. They're going to have to you're going to have to just get shots on that. Don't worry about looking for the best pass. You got to get shots on goal. Look for the rebounds because right now, we all see this, that the first 2 games have been played at the Carolina Hurricanes pace. They had won games all season in a slow, low-scoring, ugly affair. But they gotta make Anthony Watson busy. They gotta get him occupied. They gotta get him. They gotta get him to make the tough saves. And right now, in the first 2 games, the Rangers have not been able to do that. They haven't been able to capitalize when they've had the opportunities to do so, particularly on the power play, because Carolina, for a team that is so good defensively and offensively, they take a lot of bad penalties in the first couple of minutes of game 2. They took some very silly penalties that the Rangers failed to capitalize on. The Carolina's been tremendous for Rangers. They've really been the spark plug so far this playoffs. And I'm not sure if Galash should break that tantrum up, because right now they've been the real offense that the Rangers
Well, Anthony, he did break them up for part of the game.
Yeah, he did.
He put Lafreniere on the second line. He did.
Yeah.
And I think, but yeah, this is there's a lot of things that Gallant has also done wrong in these playoffs, and in terms of trying to match intensities, basically saying, hey, we played 2 of our best periods, we should just keep that up, when in reality, you needed to see that 3rd period, and the fact that you were basically playing a Devils 90s / Hurricanes now type game that you can't play because you're made of stars. And as we'll talk about, stars win, and stars getting goals win, Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the team that led the NHL in goal in fewest goals allowed this year. I mean, you can't play at their pace if you're going to win this series.
Apparently, Jay's playing doctor right now.
Yeah, I would say this too. The Rangers, even though they won a tough 7-game series, they're now 0-2. They have not played a full 60 minutes of consistent hockey throughout the entire postseason. That is going to change. They're not going to beat Carolina in 7 games, let alone 1 game, let alone 7. If they're going to be inconsistent on one end and inconsistent on the other end from game to game, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that team is. It's going to be an uphill climb. Game 3 being Sunday at 3:30. Quickly, there are so many stars on this team. Like, once you get mucked up against the Hurricanes can easily get goals when they want to, because they have a lot of stars. And one of them is Sebastian Aho, the one that tied Game 3 with under 2 minutes to go, basically smoking the rest of defense. Yeah, well, I wish I wasn't a prophet in that case, but had 81 points this season, which is only 2 away from what he had 3 seasons ago. But the guy is just consistent. 65 points in 2017-18, 83 points, 66 points, 57 points, 81 points. Guy's only 24, so he matches the intensity of anybody else that is on the Rangers line, because the Rangers have youth, but so do the Hurricanes. Brendan Smith, who hadn't scored a playoff goal in 9 years, got the feed from Aho last night to basically win the game, because they didn't need anything else after that. Carolina Aho has been the best offensive player so far this series. And honestly, Carolina plays to whatever style you want them to play at. They still are my choice to come out of the Eastern Conference from earlier this postseason. And I mean, it wasn't a out of the field pick, but they're doing what they need to do right now. They are playing not scared, and they are playing the best hockey out of anybody in the Eastern Conference. I would like to see them, if they are to win the Stanley Cup, actually win outside of their home arena, which is why Game 3 is going to be huge for them, I think, in their playoff development through this entire postseason, because it seems like in that Bruins series, once you get punched in the mouth, they start crumbling. You saw that Game 4 was the best example. Score late in the first period, challenge the play. Boston scored late in the first period to make it 2-2. Carolina challenged the play, missed the challenge, so you have to immediately go 1 man down on the power play, scored again, and then that's what happens very quickly. You haven't seen a lot. You've seen a lot of that this actually postseason, with teams just house of crumbling once one mistake is made, and that's what could turn a game like that around. So that's what the Rangers need to do to the Hurricanes. But if people like Sebastian Aho are on the ice, mistakes will very, very likely not be made. All right, moving on now to the damn other series. And it's kind of depressing when you realize how much Florida has been through, at least the Miami portion of it, not the Tampa portion of it. So we're going to talk about, despite the fact that we had 5 series that went 7 games at round 1 and 2 that went 6, teams with home ice went 7-1. Some superstar matchups are in this conference semifinals. Jay, the one that was the one in the 7-1 is the 2-time champion Tampa Bay Lightning. So that's not really an underdog, is it? They're playing their cross-state rival Florida Panthers. And if you could punch a team in the mouth in the first 2 games and pretty much blow them in the balls, that's what Tampa Bay has done, scoring, winning that third period convincingly to win the first game 4-1, and then scoring with 3 seconds in regulation to win the second game. So Tampa is going home now, 2 games to 0. What player are you watching for the Lightning?
And if you think about it, Rabbi, they've now won 3 straight road games. So they are the NHL.
I'm sorry, 3. I forgot. The game 6 was in Tampa, but yes, it is
exactly. So the back-to-back champs are the NHL's Road Warriors. That doesn't bode well for everyone else. Now, the player I'm watching is, it's kind of not really a surprise here. It's Andrei Vasilevsky, their goaltender. Despite each team in this series having plenty of weapons on the front lines and the blue lines, the second playoff iteration of the Battle of Florida, Lightning won the first iteration, beating the Panthers 4-2 in first round last year. This year's playoffs meeting was always going to come down to the goalies, and so far through the first 2 games, things are decidedly in Vasilevsky's favor as the back-to-back champs stole home ice, taking both games at the Panthers rink, as the Rabbi just noted. Vasilevsky struggled in round 1 against Toronto overall. He allowed 22 goals on 214 shots. That's an .897 save percentage and a .304 goals against average. This on the heels of a regular season where his save percentage was .916 and his goals against average is 2.49. But once again, he added to his big game resume, 30 saves on 31 shots in Tampa Bay's 2-1 series clinching win in Game 7. Carried that into this series with numbers that are even better than the ones that got him the Conn Smythe Trophy in last year's playoffs when he went 16-7 with a 1.99 goals against average and a .937 save percentage, plus 5 shutouts. Game 1, 33 saves on 34 shots, .971 save percentage in that 4-1 win. Game 2, 35 saves on 36 shots. That's a .972 save percentage in the 2-1 win. That's a total of 68 saves on 70 shots, which equates to a .971 save percentage. His goals against average, guys, is an insane 1 flat through those first 2 games. Here's some context for you. Tampa Bay won 2-2-0 in the regular season against their in-state rivals. Vasilevsky played in 3 of those games. He went 2-1, allowed 9 goals on 98 shots, .908 save percentage, and a .301 goals against average. Put those numbers into a mix with what he did in Toronto, and there's no way you'd expect the performance we've seen so far. Not at this level. If Vasilevsky continues to play at that level and doesn't run out of gas due to the ridiculous number of minutes he's played over these past 3 postseasons, and he keeps getting the type of help he's gotten from his teammates over these last 3 games. Game 7 against Toronto, his team blocks 26 shots in front of him. Game 1 against Florida, 16 block shots. Game 2, 24 block shots. They keep that up, and the Lightning just might manage to survive the loss of Braden Point, who's led the Lightning with 14 goals in each of the past 2 postseasons. We might be looking at a 3-peat. Who knows?
What's the Rudy Tomjanovich line? Never estimate the heart of a champion. Vasilevsky has never lost back-to-back postseason games, and
that's right.
Florida can't lose. It's very hard for Florida to win 4 out of 5, which is what they're going to have to do to win this. So not only does Anthony not have a voice, we're going to ask him to basically pick how the Panthers are going to avoid the President's Trophy curse, which is now, I think the President's Trophy is like the Eastern Conference Finals, Eastern Conference title. You should just never touch it or never even want to go for it and just leave it to the side. But what do the Panthers do, Anthony? Who's going to help them?
Sergei Bobrovsky, the other goalie in this series. You know what? Last year, did not play well against Tampa Bay. Actually got ran off the rake pretty much in that series, and Tampa Bay winning. This year, he bounced back, won 39 games in the regular season, played very well. it was a big reason why Florida was able to knock off Washington the first round of playoffs. In the first 2 games of this series, he has not gotten any help defensively. I mean, that third period of game one, there was like Tampa Bay just got whatever they wanted in front of the net and turned a 1-1 game into a 4-1 win just in seconds. And it shows how good Tampa Bay is offensively, where they could just turn the light on and score goals. But game two, Bobrovsky was great. He made 26 saves. A defensive miscue in the third, with 3 seconds left. It's the reason why Florida is down 0-2 in this series. But Bobrovsky, he's done a great job. He's given his team a chance to get in the game, but he's got to get help defensively up front. There's been a lot of miscues on that game-time goal. For whatever reason, the defenseman went back behind the net, chasing the puck instead of protecting the front of the net. And that left the, and obviously you saw what happened. As far as having a wide open shot, a game with a goal, he's gonna have to be lights out. And the problem with Bobrovsky is that he has this big contract. The last couple, I remember talking about him a couple of years ago during the playoff bubble for the Florida Panthers, and he just stepped up, and he hadn't played well in the postseason. So he really has to, bring his game up to another level for Florida to try to get back in this series. But defensively, Florida has made a lot of fundamental mistakes, and they have got to stay on the penalty box too, because Tampa Bay killed them with power plays in that first game. So Bobrovsky is going to be the key, but the Florida Panthers up front, they've got to help him out a little bit. They got to get pucks out of the zone. They've got to keep guys out of from jamming up the front and front of the net, and allow Bobrovsky to see the puck a little more clearly, take away those second, third chance opportunities. So, so the Florida Panthers, they got to be a little more disciplined defensively, and kind of help Bobrovsky out a little bit. I mean, he's been a good goaltender when he's on, but when he's not on, we saw what happened last year in the playoffs, and we saw, bits and pieces in that first round series against Washington, that if you open up the floodgates against Bobrovsky, he's pretty much downhill from that point on. So he's going to need some help from his teammates if this series is even going to go past 4, let alone 5 games.
I think you just said it perfectly. I think Tampa has all the momentum in the world, and I think that first game was really huge. Unlike the first game that they played against Washington in the first round, which they also lost, and everything comes sinking like we haven't won a playoff series since 1996. That's a great goal, but when you're the 1 seed in your conference and you've won the President's Cup, you have to actually do more than that. So you won that first series, big deal. The Lightning are really that little 1 step to get the Florida Panthers to the next level, and they haven't been able to do it in that first round series. Anthony, you just mentioned it perfectly. There is so many mistakes that Florida has made, especially in that third period of game 1, where they just lived their life, it seems like, in the penalty box. And again, you can't give a team like Tampa Bay, who is specifically now made for the postseason, to any chances whatsoever. They don't care if they have home ice advantage, because anytime they go to a place, they think they can win. And that's honestly true, because they don't care who's in their lineup. They have stars everywhere. So Point can miss a couple of games and it doesn't really matter. That's when they won game 1. You've already had that in their system. They have a goalie who can be on and off in Vasilevsky, but in the last count game 6 too, by the way, a game which was an elimination game for Vasilevsky. It was a 4-3 game, but there were a lot of saves that Vasilevsky made against the Maple Leafs that kept them out, that kept them in that game. I don't know what Florida does at this point. Their boogeyman is now very much getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's a tough moment for the franchise. They're going to probably have to look at who's going to coach them next year. Remember, this is an interim coach who's currently over there now after having to get rid of Joel Quenneville amid all of the Chicago Blackhawks scandal stuff that happened, and they're going to have to find out if they can have a winning mentality. Maybe this is a Barry Trotz spot. Who knows? Who knows?
But Rabbi, here's a scary thought for not only the Florida Panthers, but for the rest of the NHL. Think about it. 3 years ago, in their first trip to the Stanley Cup, lost Steven Stamkos, their captain, the heart and soul of that team. Last year, basically played without Kucherov for a large
pretty
portion
much
of
from the regular season, and got him late in the postseason. Yeah, that's
right.
That's something
So,
people
and again, completed a back-to-back. Now they're playing without Point. Any other team that might mess with their heads, Tampa Bay just looks at it and go, yeah, we've been here and done that before twice.
We'll just keep on going. That's pretty much how Tampa Bay's operated.
Yeah,
pretty much.
And they can play the same teams. Like if they play Carolina, that's who they played the second round last year, and they took care of them at 6. So let's go to the West, where both series are actually tied at 1. Colorado and St. Louis were the 2 most rested teams after round 1. Avalanche had 7 rest, Blues had 4. We've had pretty good hockey, and guys, I'm a little surprised that this series is 1-1 and could easily be 2-2. Jay, give me a player to watch from both teams in this series as it goes on to game 3, which will be tonight.
Yeah, let me start with the 1 seed, Colorado. Player to watch for me is defenseman Cale Makar. The Avs' best defenseman is a Norris Trophy candidate, and a huge reason why Colorado's offense has been so prolific this season. On our last show, I talked about his regular season numbers: 28 goals, 58 assists, 86 points, leading all NHL defensemen in goals. He was tied for 5th in assists and 2nd in points. Carried that into the Avs' first-round series against Nashville, led Colorado with 10 points, the most in NHL history by a defenseman through 4 games in a postseason, on 3 goals and 7 assists as the Avs swept the Predators. So far, not so good in this second-round series against the Blues. 180 degrees in the opposite direction, in fact. Makar has 0 points through the first 2 games and has struggled in all 3 zones. In the first period of game 1, he turned over the puck in front of the net, which led to Ryan O'Reilly scoring on a backhander at the 6:25 mark to give St. Louis a 1-0 lead. Makar was on the ice for 32 shifts, a little over 29 minutes of ice time, and had only 4 shots on goal and went 0 for 4 as Colorado escaped in OT 3-2. He was on the ice for 29 shifts, almost 24 minutes of ice time in game 2. Led the Avs in shots with 5. That should tell you all you need to know about that game. But once again, none lit the lamp as Colorado lost 4-1. And once again, he was part of a puck turnover as miscommunication between him and Andre Burakovsky led to a David Perron wrister off the heel of Darcy Kemper's glove on a 2-on-1 to give the Blues a 3-1 lead at the 10:31 mark of the third period, which pretty much put the game away. There's still plenty of series left to play, but the Avs need Makar to be the puck-moving, offensive-generating, power play quarterback and blue liner he was in the regular season and round 1 in order for them to have a shot at winning this series. For the St. Louis Blues, player I'm watching, and it shouldn't surprise anybody, and that's Jordan Binnington, their goaltender. In 2019, we were all raving on this show about Binnington standing on his head, leading the Blues to the Stanley Cup trophy. Coming into this year's chase for Lord Stanley's chalice, contractual obligation met, he wasn't even the Blues' #1 netminder, coming off a regular season that was mediocre at best. 18-14, 901 save percentage, 313 goals against average. It was Ville Husso who was the #1 guy, 25-7 with 919 save percentage and a 2.56 goals against average. Then round 1 happened. Husso lost his mojo, going 1-2 in the first 3 games against Minnesota, allowing 9 goals on 96 shots, 906 save percentage, 302 goals against. Binnington was in net for game 4, and it was like it was 2019 all over again. He won the last 3 games against the Wild, allowing just 5 goals on 88 shots. It's a 943 save percentage and a 1.67 goals against average, leading the Blues to the come-from-behind series win. He's continued his stellar play against the NHL's best offense, helping the Blues get the crucial road split in Colorado. Blues lost that opener 3-2 in overtime, but not because of Binnington. Played all 68 minutes, faced 58 shots, saved 51. He stoned Nathan MacKinnon 8 times. That's a 944 save percentage. He stopped 30 of 31 in the Blues 4-1 win in game 2. That's a 968 save percentage. And this time, the St. Louis blue line did a better job in front of him. MacKinnon only managed 3 shots and none went in. For the series so far, Binnington has a ridiculous 953 save percentage and a minuscule 188 goals against average. When he won the Cup, his save percentage was only 914. His goals against was only 2.46. Like I said, there's still plenty of series left to go. But if Binnington keeps playing like this, the Blues will give the top-seeded Avalanche all they can handle. And if Colorado can't figure out a way to get a few more pucks past him, they may not be going as far as expected.
Funny, I'm going to do my key for this series right now before we get to Anthony thing. It's kind of funny how I was listening because Colorado blew a 3-1 series lead last year against Vegas, and they still talk about it to this day. It's like, let's not do what we did at that series. Let's not do what they did that series. And I think from what you saw in that offensive explosion, scoring literally 5 goals in a period to start the series versus Nashville and really getting goals whenever they wanted in that series, you knew it couldn't continue at that pace. But if you saw the overtime, Colorado essentially controlled the puck for all of overtime. In fact, St. Louis did not get a shot off. I believe it was 13-0 shots on goal before Colorado got their goal about maybe 7 minutes into overtime.
It was 13-0.
And all of a sudden, you're like, okay, so this is the Avalanche that we've seen this year. And then the game 2 was just so sluggish. I think that's the type of feeling that you wanted to see. You want to see from a team that just gets thoroughly outplayed in overtime. St. Louis looked like the better team. St. Louis like the team that hustled the most. And that was just a shock among shocks, seeing really them being comfortable, especially in that third period. So with that being said, that's what you need to see. If Colorado's offense doesn't show up and Binnington can still do that, very likely that the St. Louis Blues will win this series and go on to the Western Conference Finals. But if Colorado shows us exactly what they showed in the Nashville series and can shake St. Louis up a little bit, Colorado can achieve their destiny. Not sure what's going to happen. In the time I made that analysis, by the way, guys, in the time I made that analysis, the Oilers and the Flames have scored 2 more goals each in their series, which has gone to CFL-like numbers of 9-6 in game 1. And then a very quiet 5-3 in game number 2. This series is tied at 1, Anthony. And give us a player from each side of the first battle of Alberta since 1991. Someone in Canada is going to be disappointed as usual. But, that's just par for the course of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Anthony, give me players from each side of this game. And if you pick the goalies, you are absolutely incorrect.
Exactly. I was about to say, Anthony, I know you're not throwing goalies out there because as Steve Levy said last night during one of the intermissions, goaltending is optional in this series so far.
It really is.
And look, for those who have not watched Conor McGregor play or just watch highlight reels, you're for a treat because, excuse me, Conor McGregor is having a postseason.
Conor McDavid.
Conor McDavid is having a postseason to remember. I mean, his 14 points in the first round was the second most since Mario Lemieux in 1992 in the first round against Washington. You look like this, in 6 of the 9 games Edmonton has played, that's 7 in round 1, and the first 2 games in round 2, he has had multi-point games in 7 of those 9 games. He's had 6 games in a row where he's had either a goal and an assist. And on top of that, I don't know if you saw his goal in game 2, which looked like something you do out of a video game as far as playing NHL 22. And I'm a video game fanatic. You use the right analog stick, you use the deep move. He shook Jacob Markstrom out of his skates pretty much and scored that goal. Conor McDavid has just been phenomenal in this postseason. He's coming off a season where he led the league with 123 points. He's been the catalyst. Even when he's not scoring, it's the little things he's doing. When he gets the puck, all eyes are on him. It just opens up every day for Edmonton as far as what they want to do in a 5-on-5, in a power play. Even on a power play goal, he has so much attention that Calgary completely fell asleep and left the sniper wide open for a game-tying goal in the second period. I mean, for Conor McDavid, I think this was we've heard so much about his brilliance, but I think finally he's kind of making a mark as far as the postseason. I think that was the one thing that was kind of missing from his superstar career. His resume was kind of a career-defining postseason run, and right now we're kind of seeing that with McDavid, and the fact that he's been such a phenomenal player not just offensive, but defensively. He's getting ugly. He's throwing body checks. He's blocking shots. He's doing everything you want out of a superstar player. And yes, I am going to contractually obligated to throw out a goalie in this series because, hey, look, someone's got to make a stop at some point to win this series. And for the Flames, it's going to be Jacob Markstrom because I don't know what you say. I mean, like I said, goaltending in this series is completely optional, but you stop 5 goals on 40 shots. I mean, you give up 5 goals on 40 shots in game 2. This is after you allow 6 goals in game 1. Markstrom, he's a Vezina Trophy finalist, by the way, and he has been terrible the first 2 games of the series. Look, somebody's defense will have to show up at some point, but Markstrom for Calgary is going to have to be the guy because it's going to have to be the guy to do something as far as goaltending because Edmonton can score. We've seen this time. We obviously saw this in this series, but you're not going to, the Flames got to realize you just can't out, and even Coach Sutter even said it jokingly that, you know what, we wanted to give up 6 goals so we can score 9, kind of joking around with it, but in reality, you need your Vezina Trophy finalist to make some saves because right now, he's been lit up. I mean, this is video game beginners level defense we're seeing in this series. And look, someone's got to show up. I mean, someone's got to build out, pitch a shutout for 1 period. They'll give a team a chance to win and not play behind the 8 ball. And for Calgary, now going on a roll, which is about 20, 25 minutes away. They're gonna need Markstrom to step up in net if they want to at least get a split in games 3 and 4 on the road.
It's funny. One thing I've noticed from Calgary so one of the things that is just I can't think. The storyline, obviously, it's a great storyline. Seeing this Battle of Alberta, we kind of really wanted to see it in the second round, but pick something in these first 2 games and you really can't because Calgary just baffles my mind. They know how to shoot the puck on net, but if you looked at game 7 of the Dallas series, they're lucky to have gotten that second goal on a skilled side shot that just hit because they were just destroying Dallas's goalie, and Dallas's goalie made the second most saves ever in a game 7. But then you have this series, and if you looked at game 1, Calgary was out shooting Edmonton at times 34-11 at some points, and they went from 6-2 to 6-6 in a matter of what seemed to be minutes. So Calgary just needs to find a way to put the puck in the back of the net even more than they already have. And I think that's weird to say from a team that just scored 9 goals in game number 1, but it's true. This is a series that's literally going to be the NFL version of team on the field who has the ball last scores, because for God's sakes, you're shooting on a 40-year-old Mike Smith, Anthony. And Mike Smith is probably the worst goalie left in this postseason out of who's left.
Yeah, and here's the thing too, when Calgary is in trouble is when you feel like you have to outscore your own defense to win a game. And that's why the Flames are kind of put themselves in right now. And that's why Markstrom is like, dude, you're Vezina Trophy finalist. You got to be the best goalie on the ice right now. The 40-year-old is outplaying you right now into the first 2 games, the first game and a half of the series.
And I would say for Edmonton, third periods have been killer. Seems pretty obvious when the third win the game, but if you're in a third period tied with Edmonton going into the third period, you might as well put the L on the board now, just because of the fact of who Edmonton has the best player in the world, and probably will finish second for the MVP this year in the National Hockey League to Austin Matthews of Toronto and Connor McDavid. But this team mid-season just turned it around, and can easily see Edmonton getting into the Stanley Cup Finals if they continue scoring at this rate. East is a lot better, but we can get to that point when we get to it. All right. Guys, let's turn on to this thing we call basketball. The NBA Final Four is set, and after a series of ups, downs, and what in the bloody freaking hell is going on? Thanks, Phoenix. We have 4 teams that didn't win a playoff series in 2021, now in the 2022 final, and teams that won a combined 4 games in the play-in and playoffs 1 year ago. One of these teams will be the NBA's 5th different champ in the last 5 seasons. Guys, let's start with the East. The East features 2 teams that are no strangers to each other, as the top-seeded Heat and second-seeded Celtics have met 3 times in the playoffs from 2011 to 2020, and the outcome is the same each and every time: Heat culture over Celtic lore. But the C's are favored in this series. They split the first 2 games, with the Heat dominating the Celtics, who were a little shorthanded in game 1. And then we were reminded that the Celtics were shorthanded in game 2 when the C's came back and dominated the Heat. And Anthony, we'll talk about who you're watching on the Celtics for a second, but I did not think Marcus Smart, by the way, whose green hair needs to go away, as we've all talked about.
Oh my God, yes.
It's not cool, but after what Marcus Smart did in that game 2, basically going for 21, 10, and 8.
24,
10, and
12.
I think he can do whatever the hell he wants, but he's not the guy who we're talking about in this game, Anthony. We're talking about somebody else.
Well, obviously, you got to talk about Jason Tatum, the superstar, and this has been a superstar postseason breakout year for Jason Tatum. Think about round 1, he literally outplayed Kevin Durant and even had a 39-point performance in that series against Milwaukee. Obviously, you think about the game 6 duel against Giannis Antetokounmpo and keeping Boston's season alive. But when you look at the first 2 games, he had 21 in the first half. Excuse me, of game 1. Miami's defense is really focused on taking Tatum away. You see them trapping really hard on the screen and roll to kind of get the ball out of Tatum's hands, which is why, and you mentioned Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart is such an important key cog to the Celtics ball movement, the offense, and the fact that he was not playing a game 1, you kind of saw. You saw the second half of that game when Miami locked in defensively. The turnovers started to happen for Boston. Tatum, who had a very efficient 27 points a game, 12 8 for 13 shooting, really struggled. Didn't get as clean as much as he did in game 1. But you see that he commands a lot of attention. So with Tatum, his playmaking ability is going to be tested very much so in this series, because Miami is going to get the ball out of his hands. They want him to pass the ball and look for open opportunities. Marcus Smart being on the court, and obviously obviously his defense as well does a great deal of disruption for Miami's offense. But the fact that he can facilitate the offense, he can run the offense and allow Tatum to play more off the ball, but he can be more of a catch and shoot guy, as he saw in the first half. Well, Boston was able to open it up a little bit. Tatum getting more open looks. There was a 3-pointer in the corner, in particular in the second quarter, where he was just left wide open, and the ball movement so forth. There was a concern, though, I do have, is the fact that they let Marcus Smart play a lot of garbage time minutes, come off a foot injury, and kept him out of the first game. And you wonder, because the conference final schedule is every other day. There are no 2-3 days off between games. Like we saw in the first and the second round, it's every other day in this series. And I felt like Boston, with the game well in hand, should have sat him and let him more time to rest. You hope for the Celtics that foot injury doesn't re-aggravate and keep Marcus Smart out maybe another game or 2 in the series, because he's so important. But as far as a superstar, Jason Tatum, I expect him to go for maybe a 40-point game with the Steelers moving to Boston for games 3 and 4 tonight and Monday, respectively. For Tatum to have a very huge game. Now, keep in mind, he's going to have to because Jimmy Butler's been impressive the first 2 games this series. So, with Jason Tatum, it's not just his scoring, but his defense on Jimmy Butler one-on-one when that matchup happens on the other side of the court. But also, he's going to have to create opportunities for his teammates when Marcus Smart is not on the court and when the defense is trapping down on him really hard. In game 1, he took the ball over a lot. I think he needs to be a little more decisive, a little quicker with his decision making when he has the ball in his hand. That's going to be a big difference as well as the series move along and keeping Boston from getting manhandled by a very physical Miami Heat defense.
I think the one problem in this series, and I'm going to kind of go back on that Marcus Smart point, is not only does both teams basically have 7 to 8 man rotations at best, the people who are below in that situation, especially for the Celtics, in the terms of Aaron Nesmith, Daniel Tice, Luke Cornett, Nick Stauskas, who I just found out was on the Celtics, and I don't think too many other NBA lifers actually knew he was on the Celtics. They don't play at all, so you also have to worry about the chance of the team getting hot. So maybe a little more than he should have, but that's the problem. One person goes down for either side, and I know Derek White has COVID right now, and I think that's why he's out. It's a little bit of trouble. Okay, so the answer for the Heat is simple, but not. Here's the deal. Jimmy Butler has been phenomenal in this series so far. His game 1 was amazing, going for 41 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals, 3 blocks. What does Jimmy Butler have to do in the playoffs before apparently going into the next level? He was the best player on the Sixers in 2019 in that series against Toronto. He basically was a one-man show in 2020 for the Heat, getting them to the finals in the bubble, to the point where he was almost exasperated because of all of the heavy lifting he had to do. And in this postseason especially, and Jay, you knew that he couldn't be stopped in that Sixers series in any way, shape, or form.
They call him Jimmy Buckets for a reason, dude. He gets them in bunches, especially in the postseason.
But it's his two-way play that's just is helping out a lot. He's been the best player offensively and almost at times defensively on the court. 29.6 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal in game 2. And they still lost by 25. Butler said at the game, as a team leader should, we got our butts whooped in this game, and he won't let that happen. And we won't, and I don't see us doing that again. And that's great. But unfortunately for Jimmy Butler, they have 5 players who are on the court, and he can't play all 5. He has to actually, rest on occasion. So Bam Adebayo has played decent defense, but the guy needs to start scoring more than 12 to 14 points a game to do something. I know Tyler Hero has ups and downs, like the best roller coaster you could ever see on Six Flags in the postseason, but gotta do it more in this postseason. Gotta be a 15 to 20 point scorer. You need to be the guy who was the easy 6th man of the year. And yes, the Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, and PJ Tucker law firm, they're all questionable for tonight's game in Boston. They need to do better as well. The Miami Heat are teetering on the edge. A lot of people think the Celtics are going to win this series because the Heat just don't have enough firepower to deal with the Celtics. And when you leave players open like Grant Williams, guess what? They're going to score 19 to 20 a game because they're professional NBA players. When you allow people like Al Horford to get on the boards, guess what? Al Horford is probably playing the best he has been in 4 years. He's going to get his points. So the Heat can't leave a lot of the Boston role players open because they'll make their shots. I don't know if I could say the same thing, Jay, about Boston to Miami. So as much as Jimmy Butler is this amazing offensive performer who should be who is, I think, one of the top 10 players in the game right now, may not matter because team meets individual, and right now the Celtics have played like a better team. Jay, stat watch for this series.
Yeah, so here's what I'm looking at. 45.6, 32.4, 75 versus 51.2, 50, and 91. Those are the shooting slash lines for the Celtics in game 1, where they lost 118-107, and game 2, where they won 127-102. We know that Boston and Miami were two of the best defensive teams in the league. Boston was number one in defensive rating, 106.2, and points allowed, 104.5. Miami was fourth in defensive rating, 108.4, and points allowed at 105.6. So it stands to reason that whichever team managed to figures out how to put the ball in the basket is the one that's going to win this series. So what was the adjustment the Celtics made to go from losing by 11 in game one to winning by 25 in game two and get the much-needed road split? May sound overly simplistic, but the Celtics got Al Horford, COVID, and Marcus Smart, right foot sprain, back in the lineup. Without Smart, the defensive player of the year at the point of attack, and Horford men in the back line and defending Miami's pick and rolls, the Celtics struggled to stop the Heat, specifically Jimmy Butler, who, as Rabbi said, burned them for 41 on 12 of 19 from the floor. And more importantly, 17 of 18 from the line. And without Smart running the offense and Horford providing good spacing, the Celtics put up that mediocre shooting line in game one. Celtics had more points in the paint, more fast break points, and more second chance points, but most of that production was in their 62-point first half. They proceeded to blow their 8-point halftime lead, getting blitzed by the Heat in the third quarter, 39-14, and they never recovered. Celtics failed to score a field goal over the first 7 minutes of that third quarter, and they finished it with 4 times as many turnovers, 8, as made baskets, 2. And to add insult to injury, it was Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, the two Celtic stars, who were the primary offenders, accounting for all 8 of those turnovers. With Horford and specifically Smart back for game 2, the Celtics were more like the team we saw most of this season. Tatum and Brown, their usual selves, as Anthony noted, scoring 27 and 24 points respectively, but they got much better looks as the ball moved better, with Smart putting the team in the matchups they wanted to attack and the sets that would work best. It resulted in Boston's two stars going a combined 17 of 30 from the floor and 8 of 13 from 3 after going 17 of 38 and 6 of 17 respectively.
We lose them again? Well, we'll talk a second. Hopefully Jay just comes back out of this, but
minutes and was a huge reason the Celtics rebounded to put up that stellar shooting line in game 2. Talked about Horford. Wasn't really a factor on offense. 10 points, 4 of 4 from the field, 2 of 2 from deep, 3 boards, 3 dimes, along with his usual solid floor game. But he made his impact on the defensive end, especially in isolation possessions. According to Synergy play type tracking, Horford's defended 52 isolation plays in the playoffs, 17 more than any other player. He's allowing 0.660 points per possession, which is the best mark among the 17 players who've defended at least 20 isolation possessions in the playoffs. And as the Celtics were going on a 27-6 run to close the first half, Horford got stops on 6 straight ISO possessions. Boston went on an insane 60-21 run spanning the first and second quarters that put them up by 29 with a little over a minute left in the first half. After going down 18-8 early in the first, Boston scored 56 points on their next 31 trips. That works out to a ridiculous 1.81 points per possession. That's like shooting 91% from the field, getting what amounts to layups and dunks every time down the floor. The actual shooting numbers were 9 of 13 overall on twos, 5 of 6 in the restricted area, 10 for 15 from 3, and 8 of 8 from the stripe. Celtics finished that first half with 70 points on 44 trips. That it works out to 1.59 points per possession. That was their third most efficient half this season and the most efficient half for any team in the playoffs, and they did it against the number 2 ranked defense in the playoffs prior to Thursday. And along the way, they held the Heat to just 1 score in their final 8 possessions of the second quarter. That resulted in only 21 points, putting Miami in a 70-45 hole after the first 24 minutes, and that 25-point deficit held up. Miami just could not find the same offensive rhythm they had in game 4. Welcome back, Horford and Smart, right? However, since defense is the Celtics calling card, I'll end with a next-gen defensive stat from the Athletics' Zach Harper. -33, -27, -13, -15. Those were the plus-minus numbers for Tyler Hero, Dwayne Dedmon, Caleb Martin, and Victor Oladipo, respectively, as the Celtics shut down Miami's top reserves. Oh, and despite scoring a game-high 29, Butler finished -20 for the night. Boston probably won't be able to totally replicate this kind of performance, but if they manage to get close, guys, East's number 1 seed is going to be in some serious trouble.
The great thing I love about Boston is they can win a game so many ways. Like game 7 and game 7 of the Bucks series, and game 2 of this series, they did the same thing. Shot the lights out of the arena. and basically put their opponents in submission. Game 4, they basically won in a slugfest against a championship ball club. Game 6, all you needed is a 40-plus point, the most points scored in an elimination game, the second most points scored in an elimination game from Jason Tatum. They can do everything. They still probably haven't had the Jaylen Brown scored 40-point game. You know that's coming. And they still, that's the heart of it. That's the team that could really win a championship. Something that could do so many different types of games and do them well. I still think the Heat have one run left in them, but it doesn't seem like it logically, but it's the playoffs. Always throw logic out the window. West time. It is the 3rd-seeded Golden State Warriors, who after a tough 6-game series versus Memphis and ending up losing Gary Payton II for at least this series, they're going up against the 4th-seeded Mavericks, who after a tough 7-game series versus the Phoenix Suns made the Suns lose their pride probably for the next year, made DeAndre Ayton lose money, made Little Wayne lose respect. There's a lot of things that happened in this series in that series where Dallas made Phoenix lose. Let's talk about it now, as it is again 2-0 Warriors. We'll talk about the specifics as we go along. Anthony, Luka's been amazing. Can't do it all. Game 1 was a little bit of a blip. Game 2 was really, really good, but the result remains the same for them as it did in the Phoenix series. They're down 2-0 going home.
Yeah. And my question is, has anybody seen Spencer Dinwiddie? Because
still the best net this postseason, though.
Oh,
you know what? That was below the belt. You know what?
Maybe I lost my voice.
You know, maybe me lose my voice. You just kind of pick up the next fashion for me for the next couple of weeks.
I can do that for you. I can do that. I got that for you.
All right. Well, Spencer Dinwiddie, he scored 30 points, 11 of 15 shooting in Game 7 in that blowout win against Phoenix. But his ability to create offense, to create his own shot, to take advantage of the big smashes and one-on-ones was why I was kind of focused on him coming into this series. But he's been MIA. Let's just be honest. He scored a quiet 17 points in the Game 1 rout in the loss. Game 2, Dallas cooking on offense. He contributed he scored 4 points in 22 minutes. A -8 when he was on the court. He was a -24 in Game 1. Spencer Dinwiddie has got to, I looked at him as being kind of guy who could be the spark player off the bench and give Dallas the second or that third scorer like he did in Game 7 against Phoenix and off and on in Games 3 and 4 in that Phoenix series also. But Luka can't do it all alone. I mean, we saw Reggie Bullock had a good game too. We saw obviously Jalen Brunson really had a good game too. But they need more. They can't just have Luka score 40 and still lose by double digits. But we have seen in this playoff so far, Spencer Dinwiddie has got to step up. He's got to be the guy that they traded for, that they thought he was when he was with the Nets. And he was kind of the guy that would give you 17 to 20 points, be able to generate offense, be able to knock down some outside shots, which he clearly has not done the first 2 games of the series. Spencer Dinwiddie has got to really bring his A game in Game 3 and 4. Otherwise, this series may end in a sweep the way the Warriors cooking offensively and being able to just take advantage of Dallas' small ball lineup and getting whatever they want, particularly at the rim, like we saw in Game 2, at the end of Game 2, Dallas needing to stop, just unable to slow Golden State down offensively. They're going to need something more out of Dinwiddie because he's kind of the main guy coming off that bench that can give Dallas a lift offensively, but spare Luka some minutes to allow him to rest. So that way they have a fresh Luka Doncic later in games as the series go along.
I will have to say this. Dallas basically used a 6-man rotation last night with Dinwiddie playing the least amount of minutes out of those 6 of 22 minutes. That's not a deep team. And I think the question is, what does Jason Kidd do in game 3? Do you play a guy like Davis Bertans more? Do you play, good Lord, I hate to say the words, Frank Ntilikina a little bit more? There's just not a lot going on that team. And any black hole that you have, Dwight Powell scored 0 points, Dinwiddie had 4, Bertans had 6, Maxi Kleber, who played 33 freaking minutes, had 3. And the fact of the matter is, I can tell you one player on Golden State who is the key to the game, but then I have to realize it's everybody else. Offensively, it's almost a wash. You'd think Steph Curry is going to have a bad night? Okay, here's Klay Thompson to pick up the slack for him, especially if it's a game 6. Curry had 32 last night, but Thompson 2 games ago was the star of that team, and Curry only had 20 the game before, but everybody scored. Okay, so Klay and Steph aren't doing too well. Here's Jordan Poole, who had 23 coming off of the bench last night and has really performed much better than he has not performed this postseason. So you have to put Jordan Poole in there. Did you take care of all of the guards and are playing big against them? That's great. Here's Kevon Looney, who had 22 rebounds in the season in the game 6 last week against Memphis, and then performed another Friday Night Delight this week, going for 21 and 12 last night in 32 minutes. And oh yeah, here's Andrew Wiggins, who provided the most defense on Luka Doncic in game number 1. I know they switched on him all of the time, but it was Wiggins who was providing the most of that. And then here's Draymond Green, of course, who this team was a lot better. The one time when the Warriors were struggling this year, it was because Draymond wasn't on the floor. Draymond provides still stats on every single bit of the line that helps you against your team, that helps him against a team. I was going into this series thinking that Draymond was going to be the primary Luka guy, but in game 1 where Luka only scored 20, they basically put the entire Golden State Warriors team, the people who could play defense against Luka Doncic, confused the hell out of Jason Kidd, worked out perfectly. So if you're going to pick one player on this team that's going to do stuff, it's going to be the guy who plays the most defense in Draymond, because in my opinion, the only way the Mavericks can win this series is if Luka goes for 40 and everybody else can go for 70. And I don't know if that's possible. I think this Warriors team is about as balanced as I've ever seen a Warriors team, even including the 17 and 18 teams with KD, because if you look at their lineup, they play 7 as well, but Jordan Poole and, God forbid, Otto Porter Jr. have provide contributions that can be starters on any team. And you look at the people who aren't playing. Juan Toscano-Anderson was really good last year in the playoffs, and I'm sure if you put him in, he'll do well. Jonathan Kuminga has been one of the better rookies in the league this year, and I'm sure if you put him in, it's going to be perfect for this team because he's not too big for the moment. Gary Payton II is going to possibly play in the finals if they make it that far. You have a finals MVP who is currently on the bench, and Andre Iguodala who didn't play. And you have a number 2 overall draft pick also on the bench in James Wiseman, who probably won't be a Warrior next year because they just don't need him as much as they need depth. I ought to give a hand to the Warriors. 8-0 at home this postseason, doing everything possible right. As I said to Anthony last night, the way they play the game on offense when they are rolling is beautiful. The way they choose their shots is beautiful. And the way that they play their defense is beautiful. It's amazing how much has changed with Thompson back in the lineup. And it's amazing how much has changed this whole entire season. They have remade themselves from the team that won the title in 2015 to the team that is very favored to win the title in 2022, and for good reason. Jay. Yeah. Interesting. This has been an interesting series so far, and there's a lot of ways you can go for your stat, but give me one.
Yeah. Well, I can't just give you one because, as you said, there's been a lot of ways to go here. So I'm looking at 3 different aspects here, and they've all been on display through the first 2 games. 2s versus 3s, assists versus field goals, points in the paint. So I'm going to start with the 2s, which is I'm going to call dropping deuces, and I mean that in a positive way. Golden State, a little under 68.
Phrasing, but okay, I'll give it to you.
a little under 68% from 2 in game 1, a little over 59% from 2 in game 2. Warriors made a bet in game one that they'd convert twos at a better rate than Mavericks would convert threes. Everybody knows Dallas takes more threes and makes more threes than any team in the playoffs. Golden State was banking on high percentage offense, defeating the pull of the three-pointer. Here's what Warriors head coach Steve Kerr said on his team's shooting in game one. Here's the quote. My ideal game is to shoot 70% from three, but I thought we took what the defense gave us. They did a good job of taking away a lot of our threes, and a lot of our guys made those mid-rangers that I think you have to make in the playoffs. I just feel like teams are going to take away layups. They're going to take away threes. If you can step in and knock down some 15-footers, I think you have to be able to do that, end quote. Golden State did that big time, game one, knocking down 14 of those mid-rangers. Mavs shot better from three in game two, and the Dubs shot worse on twos, which is why the game was closer until the fourth quarter when the Warriors basically hit everything in sight, dropping 43 in the final frame to complete the comeback from 14 down at the half. They held Dallas to 13 points in the third quarter and outscored them by 11 in the fourth, which leads to my next stat, living and dying by the three. Dallas, 11 of 48 from three in game one. 22.9%. 21 of 45 from three in game two, 46.7%. Golden State, 10 of 29 for three in game one, 14 of 28 from three in game two. The Mavs clearly died by the three in game one, as that 22.9% clearly showed. Not that the Warriors were much better at 34.5% on those 29 attempts. Game two was different for both teams. Now, while the totals for the game would indicate that Dallas was much better from beyond the arc, it was a tale of two halves in that regard for the Mavs. They dropped 72 and made 15 threes in the first half, led Golden State 72-58. They put up just 45 in the second half, including those 13 in that third quarter, only made 6 threes and were outscored by Golden State 68-45 in the half as the Warriors came back to win by 9. Knocking threes down at a 50% clip by the Dubs no doubt helped. Now, which has me moving on to my next stat, which somewhat ties back to my first one. Points in the paint. Game one, Golden State 44, Dallas 32. Game two, Golden State 62, Dallas 30. And here's the key stat from the Athletics' Law Murray on that. Golden State's advantage in points in the paint in both games. So they outscored the Mavericks in both. Game one, that was all about the 14 mid-range field goals as the key substat in that points in the paint package, as I noted before. Golden State made only one mid-range field goal in game two, but they utterly abused the Mavericks with repeated drives and dump-offs inside. Exhibit A of all of this is that all 10 of Kevon Looney's field goals were in the paint. He was 10 of 14 for those 21 points and 12 boards. By the way, he's the first Warriors center to post a 2010 playoff game since Robert Parrish in 1977, and from a guy who was a career 4.7 points per game scorer in the NBA and hadn't topped 20 points in a game since his freshman year at UCLA, no less. Steph, Clay, and Jordan Poole each had 5 buckets in the paint, and Golden State's frequency of scoring in the paint increased in each quarter in game two, 10, 14, 8, and then 20. Points in the paint are usually assisted on, putbacks on offensive boards aside, which leads me to my final stat, assists versus field goals. Game one, Golden State had 24 assists, Dallas had 31 field goals. Game two, Golden State 33 assists, Dallas had 37 field goals. Here's a key stat from the Athletic, Zach Harper, which was started with the 31-24 in game one. And think about this. The disparity grew in garbage time. It was 26-22 when the starters were given the rest of the night off. So whenever you have a pretty even number between one team's made field goals and another team's assisted field goals, you can usually guess the team with the assisted field goals won big, and that's exactly what happened. Warriors did a better job of hitting shots off distributing, and the Mavs just struggled to make shots in general. Game two, Mavs made 37 field goals. Warriors had 33 assists. Result was the same, a Dubs victory. Hands down, Luka Doncic has been the best player in the Western Conference playoffs, but Rabbi, you put it succinctly and to the point. Golden State may be the best team. The fact that they've won both games in decidedly different fashions, getting contributions up and down the line from the likes of Looney, Poole, Wiggins, and Porter. You got Draymond being Draymond in every way, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You got Clay being more of a role player than a star. And you got Curry being Curry in game two after not so much in game one. And they're still winning both games. I just don't see how the Mavs make this a series. Then again, we said the same thing about them after the first 2 games against Phoenix. 2 games in Dallas will be very telling, fellas. Should be fun, though.
We'll see. I mean, I do think the Warriors do have a lot of advantages that the Mavericks don't in terms of team and a lot of in terms of depth. But Jason Kidd's comments actually really made me interested because he was talking about, okay, so they held serve. We're going back home. We know what happened last series. It reminded me a lot of a game in 2002, over 20 years ago, when the Celtics came back to erase a huge deficit to beat the Nets. It was 26, 28 points going into the fourth quarter. And the Nets took care of business at home and won that series. So we'll see. Time will tell. Before we go, let's talk. I want to talk very quickly about a quick rant I have. So the PGA Championship is going on this week in Tulsa, Southern Hills. Will Zalatoris is leading. Great story. Tiger Woods, not doing terrible, made the cut again. But there's one thing. The defending champion is not there. And that defending champion is Phil Mickelson. Phil Mickelson has not had the greatest of years so far. And honestly, people aren't talking about it as much. Remember when Tiger Woods went through that whole entire adultery scandal and all of the drug issues, and then everybody was just discounting his name and discounting his loyalty and saying his record is tarnished in golf? Well, Phil Mickelson has done worse, in my opinion. The fact that he is part of this Saudi tour led by Greg Norman, another true major winner. I'm sorry, just one major. He really choked in the rest of them. And they're trying as much to get people to come to the tour. Phil Mickelson being one of the stalwarts. A bunch of people have expressed interest. Even Sergio Garcia basically said during one tournament this year, I can't wait to leave this tour and go over. The PGA is obviously fired back and saying, if you're leaving, you're not coming back. So there's been a lot of talk about that. But it's just the comments of Phil Mickelson. First of all, here are the comments that he made a couple of months ago about this relationship with the Saudis. There's scary mother efforts to get involved with. We know they killed Washington Post reporter Jamal Khashoggi and have a horrible record on human rights. They execute people over there for being gay. Knowing all of this, would I even consider it? Because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reshape how the PGA Tour operates. They've been able to get by with manipulative, coercive, strong-arm tactics because we, the players, have had no recourse. And as a nice guy, as PGA Commissioner Jay Monahan comes against, unless you have leverage, you won't do what's right. Anthony, you know Vince McMahon has run shows in Saudi Arabia twice a year. Do you think Vince McMahon would even say something stupid like that to basically put the Saudis in a good light? He'd get reamed. So that's what Phil Mickelson did in this situation. And now Phil Mickelson, there is a book coming out by golf writer Alan Shipnick, who's basically going to talk about all of Phil Mickelson's career. And then it turns out that we find out recently that Phil Mickelson lost a grand total of $40 million. That's right, $40 million between 2010 and 2014. The height of his popularity, the height when he was doing well in majors, when he had many tour wins. I get nervous when I have to refill $25 more on DraftKings. So imagine the $40 million that Phil Mickelson has lost, and that's not looked under the table, but not a lot of people are talking about it. Gary McCord, who used to do golf on CBS, also mentioned that he was literally betting with Mickelson while Mickelson was on the course. Mickelson obviously betting on himself, not necessarily to tank like Pete Rose apparently did on baseball. McCord, again, these are all rumors of what he said. McCord would flash 2 fingers up for a $2 bet, for like a $20 bet, or $3 fingers up for a $30 bet. I'm sure it's more than that. What Phil Mickelson has done over the past few months has what could be admired as tarnished any reputation whatsoever. We've talked about it all the time. Pete Rose will never be the same since he gambled on baseball. Sure, he's been a dick about it since, but it really hasn't been too much. Calvin Ridley is not going to be playing football for an entire year because of his gambling issues. And we've seen a lot of people get in trouble for all of the gambling that they've done. Yes, we're in a new era. Yes, I make bets daily on DraftKings and FanDuel, but I don't do it excessively to the tune of $40 million. You don't have to send money to this house in North Babylon. We're perfectly fine. But what just worries me is the fact that Phil Mickelson, everybody's poster boy, a man who will appear on a Manningcast probably again sometime in the next year because he's such a great guest who knows a lot about all sports. Apparently not a lot, or he would have lost $40 billion. I'm just very worried about why we treat someone like Mickelson like he's still a social hero. And it's like, don't talk about what he's done. It could ruin the PGA Championship and all of the majors that he's won. And we're easily here to say how all of these other stars have made great progress from the lows of the career that they've been in. Sounds about right.
Yeah. You know what? I'll add to that. And to counterpoint Webb Simpson, it's that cancel culture when you've done it to yourself. I mean, when you were your own worst enemy, you make your own self-inflicted wounds. But can we stop blaming cancel culture and just for lack of accountability? And this is what we have in Phil Mickelson, okay? He's done it all to himself. He's trying to play both sides of the fence as far as his excuse me, this PGA Saudi situation. He's trying to play both sides of the fence, and it's backfired. The gambling loss is another thing. What difference a year make? I mean, we made a big deal over Will Smith smacking someone on national TV. It was everywhere. Phil Mickelson actually kind of doing his own harm, doing his own self-inflicted damage to himself and his career. It's not being talked about, but it's not cancel culture. Okay, we gotta stop. We gotta stop allowing people to blame a cultural situation for someone who is consciously making bad decisions and is becoming their own worst enemy. And that's what I had a problem with Webb Simpson saying we're in a cancel culture right now. Well, no, we're not. Phil Mickelson a year ago was on top of the world. What you said, the defending PGA champion, and a year later, I mean, when I canceling him, this is called accountability. This is what this is all about. You made bets on yourself and you lost millions of dollars. You try to play both sides of the fence with the PGA Saudi situation, and it's backfired. And now you've hurt your own reputation. That has nothing to do with cancel culture. This is Phil Mickelson basically being Phil Mickelson, but now we're just seeing it in plain view. So now everyone is now seeing maybe what we didn't see behind the scenes as far as Mickelson is concerned. So yeah, I agree with you, Rabbi. I mean, the whole thing of Mickelson and the fact that people are kind of afraid to kind of call it out for what it is, it kind of puzzles me a little bit, because with Tiger Woods and what was going on in his personal life, it was everyone. We pretty much buried.
We threw the book at him. We basically threw the book.
We threw the book at him. Whereas now with Phil Mickelson, it's like, well, we don't want to swallow too much to what Phil Mickelson is doing or saying, because we don't want to come off as the bad guy. But it's like, well, Phil Mickelson's doing it to himself at the end of the day. And this is the problem I have, is when you're doing it to yourself, it's called accountability. All right, just man up and own what you said and done, and go from there. Because the more you keep blaming something else or blaming a culture or whatever the case may be, it's just more making yourself into the bad guy. I think that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, Rabbi, you very nicely kept this rant under wraps. I had no idea where you were going with it. So, once I saw the road you were going down, and you mentioned Alan Shipnuck, and he's a guy whose name I remember, because if I remember correctly, he used to write for Sports Illustrated. So
yeah, until about a couple of months ago, actually.
Right. So, I mean, I kind of did a bit of a quick Google search, and it's interesting. In the wake of this, he wrote an article for a site called the Fire Pit Collective back in the middle of February, when Phil's comments first kind of came to light, and then the stuff that you quoted, Rabbi, and then Phil trying to walk it back and apologize and saying he made reckless comments and all of that, and that his stuff was taken out of context. I read the article. And Shipnuck closes it by saying, and I'll read the passage to you guys. Mickelson has the compulsive need to be seen as the smartest guy in the room. Not once did he say our conversation was off the record or on background or just between us or anything remotely like that. He simply opened a vein. Even knowing he came armed with an agenda, I was amazed by his bluntness. As always, he remains a wild card. Is the House of Saud's long money seductive? Obviously. But for Mickelson, the Saudi question is about being right as much as anything else. Is he really ready to try and blow up the PGA Tour if he doesn't get his way? I know 20 guys who want to do this, he said about, the Saudi Golf League and the tour. And if the tour doesn't do the right thing, there's a high likelihood it's going to happen. We all now know it's not happening. It's crashing and burning. And Mickelson has made himself a pariah. And Anthony, I agree with you 100%. It is long past time. It used to be that, you put your foot in your mouth, you got called out on it. And instead of, pointing fingers at other people, and I know athletes all the time talk about stuff being taken out of context and all that. But you know what? Phil needs to be held accountable. You shoot your mouth off, you put your foot in it, you embarrass yourself, you embarrass the PGA Tour. Okay, fine. You've got issues with the way they run things. Fine. You don't think the players, have enough of a voice in how the tour does things. Fine. That's all well and good. And you can stand up on that platform and make your stump speeches about that. And you know what? As a respected player in the game, people will listen, to those type of speeches, and maybe action will start. But the way he went about it was completely completely wrong in my estimation. And invariably it went off the rails, went pear-shaped, and now he's in this situation where he says, and I'm going to borrow a quote from Brendan Quinn, who wrote a similar article about this for The Athletic. And he writes, the most significant piece of Mickelson's apology, air quotes, was, quote, "I know I have not been my best and desperately need some time away," which, as Quinn writes, now opens the door to speculation on one of golf's biggest stars will be seen on the course again. This was written in advance of the Masters, which was the next big thing up. Obviously, we didn't see Phil there. He's not here for the PGA. You wonder where, if he's going to make an appearance at any other stop on the tour between now and the end of the season. And honestly, if Phil wants to come back, Phil needs to do a better mea culpa than he did, in the wake of these comments back in February, where he kind of apologized, but still tried to point the finger elsewhere. And you say, not really on him. Anthony, I agree with you. I'm sick and tired of the whole cancer culture thing being thrown around. You know what? Be accountable. You screw up, my bad. You know what? Said some things I shouldn't have. Probably was a better way to do that. Was a little pissed off at a situation, and I let my emotions get the better of me. That's an apology I can accept. But every time you follow that with a but or some other qualifier after that, I'm sorry. I'm not going to buy it, and the rest of the world isn't either. Phil, I hope wherever you are, chilling out in Arizona or wherever you are doing some serious reflecting about who you are, who you want to be, and how you get your status back as one of the stars and most respected players in the game. The game is better off when Lefty is there and playing well, especially when both he and Tiger are playing well at the same time. It makes any match, whether it's a major or any other match, that much better and more fun to watch. Will golf survive Lefty, not being around? Sure it will. Just like it survived Tiger not being around. Stars have come and gone. There have been ebbs and flows and valleys and peaks when a guy who's a major star in the game, his career ends, or he's done, some other star will rise up and take his place. But at the same time, if you're going to hold yourself as one of the pillars of this game, act like it. Lefty's not been doing that of late.
You just said it perfectly, and I'm going to end it on that.
Rabbi, before you do, I just want to take a minute, guys. One of the greatest baseball writers of any generation, Roger Angel passed away this week at 101. He is the epitome of what a baseball writer is, and the way he wrote about this game. If you've ever read any of his books about the Boys of Summer or any of the pieces he did for the New Yorker, all of which I read when I was working at Condé Nast, his voice in terms of how beautiful this game truly is and how amazing and interesting the guys who play it are. That voice is now silent, and the game itself, the national pastime, is that much worse off now that he's no longer there to write and talk about it. He will be
the
missed.
last great writers of the baseball generation.
Nailed it right there.
All right. For Jay Kaplan and whatever's left of the voice of the 39-year-old, happy birthday, Anthony Strait. I'm Stephen Rabinowitz. Sorry I threw the 39 around at you. I mean, I don't know if guys care about their age as much as women do. So
I embrace it.
Good enough. Well, that's another edition of On the Sports Lines. Remember, see this show live if you have this morning. Thank you. At facebook.com/On the Sports Lines, YouTube on demand, youtube.com/On the Sports Lines, and for Twitter
at ONTH Sports Lines, where you will see a link to this show. And if you go there right now, you will see that I dropped a link to the Athletics obit on the late Roger Angel. It is worth a read, as is Lindsay Adler's article about her conversation with him last year.
Enjoy all of the sports that are going on right now, and God forbid, get outside. It's like 90 degrees out there. Good afternoon, good morning from On the Sports Lines.
Have a good one.